we now welcome in the new head coach of Texas. He is Sean Miller. Sean, welcome, and let's get right to the million-dollar question out of the gate. Just how good is the barbecue food in Austin?
Oh man, it's hard to explain, John. Someone like yourself would really appreciate it. A lot like Italian food in New York City. There's a great variety here. I think it's everybody's opinion on which place is actually the best. Terry Black's is one that I've gone to a number of different times, and that's very, very good. But yeah, Texas barbecue is a real thing, and I've experienced it.
Well, I look forward to that for the future, but right now let's focus on the present. What is it like during the first month or month and a half when you take over a program in college basketball right now in this current climate?
Well, it's a collision of a number of forces. One, I think there's a lot of excitement. Things are new, and obviously things are moving very, very fast. But a lot like being a good player, I think you always come back to the main thing. And what are you in charge of? And obviously, I'm in charge of building the basketball program here at Texas to a very, very high standard. Because the one thing you learn quickly on our campus, John, everybody's at that standard. If you look at our baseball team, I think today they're going to be the overall number one seed in the NCAA tournament. Men's and women's golf are respectively one seeds in their tournament. And their goal and the bullseye here is to win a national championship. Obviously Sark and what he's been able to build on the football side is incredibly impressive. And everybody has this huge sense of excitement about the season ahead. So for me, everything is about building our roster and making sure that from a fundamentals perspective that through my experience that do the best job that I possibly can to get our program off to a good start. The building part of it towards eventually having the opportunity to compete for that same top prize that it just seems like every other sport is doing here.
Sean, 3 years ago when you took the Xavier job for a second time, you told me that in 2009 you wouldn't have left Xavier for Arizona if Xavier at that time was in the Big East. Why at this point did you leave Xavier, a Big East school, for Texas?
Yeah, and John, it's a good question on a lot of levels. And when you in college sports, when you make a decision today, things happen immediately. So it doesn't feel right leaving the place you left. It certainly isn't always going to feel right to the people at that previous place, because it's like on Monday you were there and on Tuesday you left forever. And to some degree that's unfortunately like how it happens. There's not a bridge of a
Right.
month or a 2 month goodbye, etc. But I loved my experiences at Xavier. Remember, I was there for 11 years, two different
Yeah.
stops, 8 years as the head coach. And the Big East speaks for itself. Like all the different things that you and I have talked about the last couple of years remain true. It's an amazing place. The Big East tournament, it's hard to explain to people. And I played in the Big East and coached in it. And that's something I'll cherish forever, as I will my time at Xavier. But, there's only one Texas. And when I had this opportunity, like everybody in their profession, when you're given a great opportunity with a great challenge, and those two things meet, sometimes it's hard to look at it in any other way other than like, this is something that I have to do, I want to do, and you never look back. So I think that's part of it. I'll also tell you that the world of college sports is not the same place as it was 4 years ago. I think that's a fair statement. Some of the things, advantages, disadvantages that you have at a certain program or conference then may not be the same advantage. As a matter of fact, it might be a disadvantage now. So the one thing about this place, the University of Texas, is, whatever the future of college sports is, we'll be at the table. And I think that's very comforting for any coach that's on our campus.
Well, then what specifically do you think you might be able to do at Texas that you couldn't do at Xavier?
I don't know if it's a could have or couldn't have, answer to that question. What I'm in charge of here is to compete for a national championship and to one day win one. And that becomes my focus. The places in the Big East Conference in this climate, I think they're all trying to look at, okay, in this new world, where is our place? How do we go about it? And when I was at Xavier, I enjoyed all of those challenges. But here, what I'm in charge of, I think, is very clear cut, and that becomes the task.
The SEC put a record 14 teams into the NCAA tournament last season, which means a bevy of quad one opportunities in conference play. I'm curious, for a coach who was on the bubble and had to be flawless throughout the last 5 or 6 weeks of the season just to make the NCAA tournament, how much did that appeal to you?
Well, the SEC is very appealing because, again, it's to my earlier point, and there's a lot of people that can agree or disagree. You're asking me. I'm on your podcast, so I'm giving you my opinion. In 2025, I don't know if there's a better place to be than the Southeastern Conference, and it's not just because of basketball. It's because of the greatness of football. It's about how they've embraced the future, maybe as well or before anybody else did. So I'm excited about it. There's some amazing coaches in this league. Florida won a national championship. There's Hall of Fame coaches that are in the Hall of Fame, and there's Hall of Fame coaches that are going to be in the Hall of Fame. And to be able to go against them, again, when you want to be the best, if that's how you're wired to compete for the top spot, you have to be able to embrace competition. You kind of, like Mike Tomlin says with the Steel, you either run from competition or you run to it. And coming here to Texas, there's a lot of running to the competition, which includes the SEC. But no doubt, powerful conference. I think it'll bring out the best in all of us, and I'm excited about it.
Sean, about 12 years ago, I came out to Arizona to do a piece on your program. And, you told me that you thought about going to the Final Four probably every 10 minutes or so. And then when you came back to Xavier, you had this renewed, obviously, perspective on life, being out for a year, appreciating the balance of work and family. I'm curious, now that you've been back in coaching for 3 years, has the fire that burned inside of you 12, 13 years ago at Arizona now reach the same levels now that you're back in the game?
Yeah, it's still the same, if not even more so. The difference, John, is I'm just a much more experienced person than I was then. You don't know what you don't know. With time and experience comes a lot of wisdom, and some of those greatest lessons you've learned that built you into a better version of yourself or a better coach don't always come through success.
Yeah.
It comes through the most difficult, challenging times where you learn lessons that you'll carry with you down the road that, quite frankly, you weren't equipped to even have as part of who you were back then when you're younger. I talked to Steve Sarkisian here, and just it's powerful to listen to him because you could tell his seasoning came through a lot of different types of experiences. And maybe if you look at him today and say he's the best that he's ever been, I think there's a strong argument to support that. A lot of it is because of all the different experiences that he went through before he ever showed up here at Texas. And, I hope one day people put me in that category, all the good and bad, all the different experiences that I've had the pleasure and opportunity to go through. It builds your fire. If you would ask me, do you think about going to the Final Four every 10 minutes or every day now? My answer would be no, because that's not going to help me get there. What's going to help me and us build this program into greatness is to have processes that are impeccable, to do what you do every day better, and to keep your eyes on that target right there, because the results will follow.
You mentioned Steve Sarkisian. Obviously, Texas is at the apex of college football. I know that you were at Arizona, but Arizona's football program is not obviously on the same level as a place like Texas. How much are you looking forward to being part of a blue chip football program?
Very much. I mean, it's exciting to even think about the possibility of going to games. I think the opening game is Texas at Ohio State, and the game time came out this past week, which is a big deal. It's at noon, and there's a group of people that are going to go to that game, and I've been invited. Am I going? Of course. Why would I not go to that game? But John, look, I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And there's nobody talking a whole lot about any sport other than maybe hockey, the Penguins. You talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers and football. But I'll tell you, on our campus, there's room for a lot of success in a lot of programs. To say the University of Texas is only about one sport, we love football, and I think everybody understands what makes Texas Texas. But man, our baseball program, women's volleyball, women's basketball is in the Final Four this past year. There's room for others to be great, and people here want a basketball program to be like the football program. So you have all the support in the world. You have the SEC, and again, you've been to Moody Center, right?
Yep.
Where we play. It's hard to explain to people that you have this, world-class indoor music venue that also acts as your home court. It's a spectacular place. And I think anyone that's played in Moody knows what I'm talking about. So we have an amazing home court located on our campus as well. A lot of advantages.
Now, somebody that you used to work with at Arizona, Greg Byrne, went from Arizona to Alabama, where he is now the athletic director. And I know during the year in between Arizona and Xavier, you spent some time with him, and he really educated and informed you on what it's like to work and operate in the SEC. How much of an influence did Greg Byrne have on you to one day coach in the SEC?
I wouldn't say he had an influence. Chris Del Conte is the reason I'm here, and I have a great relationship with Chris. He was at Arizona for a long period of time before I showed up at Arizona, but we have mutual, strong friendships through those types of people, one of which is Jim Livengood, who hired me as the head coach at Arizona in 2009. So, but Greg Byrne is a great friend. We spent 7 great years at the University of Arizona together. I would just say what he made me aware of is just the greatness of the SEC. The slogan, it just means more. It does. It means more. And it means a lot here at the University of Texas.
Sean, when you look at your coaching career, you have a number of games in the NCAA tournament where you were connected to Texas personally. Thad Matta's last win as Xavier's head coach before you became head coach in 2004 was a Xavier win over Texas in the Sweet 16. Derek Williams in 2011 had incredible block in the final seconds as Arizona beat Texas, and then you beat Texas in the Sweet 16 in 2023, and obviously you beat them again in the Elite Eight last year. How ironic is it that you're now coaching the Longhorns when you've had so many epic battles with Texas in the NCAA tournament?
Well, one thing, and you've never been wrong, but I'm going to correct you. Texas beat us in 2023 in the Sweet 16.
Correct. Texas beat you in 2023.
They went on to play Miami. Yeah. It's the first mistake I think I've ever caught you making.
I'm trying to funnel four things together here.
Yeah, but you're right. Unique experiences against Texas, whether it be at Xavier or at Arizona, and obviously the game you were at, John, this year. Forget Xavier, Texas, just the game itself. It was one of the great games I've ever been involved with. The crowd was at a fever pitch towards Xavier and us, and UD Arena is a spectacular place to have a college basketball game. Whether that might have been the best first 4 game ever. Just the pageantry in the gym, the crowd, I think really the quality of the game itself. So I was very proud, and will forever be proud of that game right there. It's one of the great games I've been a part of. But you're right, there is a unique connection, and I'm not sure how it's happened, but it did. I guess that's 4 times, during my time.
Sean, what are your initial thoughts on the roster that you've put together?
Well, everybody gets here in 2 weeks, and it's really been fluid and a work in progress. Really, even through last week, we have one more spot left that we potentially could add a player here in the next 2 to 4 weeks. But I like our team and what we've started to build on for a number of reasons. One of which is retention. Being able to get Dalen Swain and Lacina Traore from Xavier, who understood our program, understands our staff, how we do things. I think it'll be very helpful for everybody else because they know terminology and our way of doing things on an everyday basis. I think that, the 5-6 players that we've returned and been able to keep who were at Texas a year ago, incredibly important. and when you go through those, Kendall Weaver, Tremont Mark, Jordan Pope, those three have the most experience. Nick Cody is a young player that's growing older, and a couple other guys with them. But, those four, retention is still huge in our game. Being able to get people to return, quality people and players that were a part of what you did a year ago. So in a weird way, that's like 6 or 7 from 2 different places that are familiar with either us as coaches or Texas and the SEC, right? And then the guys that we were able to bring in, I like all of them, and I'm really eager and excited to build and grow them and to have a great summer with them.
You mentioned Dalen Swain, who made a significant jump from his freshman to sophomore season at Xavier. What could the jump look like from his sophomore to junior season now at Texas?
Well, the cool thing about Dalen's improvement, John, is it stems from just him being incredibly young. He came to us at Xavier at 17 years old. So when you watched him as a freshman, in which he played a lot, he was a true 18-year-old freshman the entire year. Last year, he was 19 as a sophomore. So he's still very young. He's 19, going to be 20 years old this summer. He does a lot of different things. His rise on the court stems from his versatility. So, I think some of it is Dalen's has a great attitude. He's very intelligent, plays the game to win it. And I think when you're rooted in that right there, that allows you to continue to improve. Now, everybody's looking at his shooting, and I definitely believe he can make a jump this season and taking more threes and making more. If you look at his free throw percentage, John, he was one of the leading free throw shooters in the Big East last year from start to finish. And I think that's a really good sign of things to come for him as he continues to expand his game.
You referenced Lucina Traore, and I'm going to try and redeem myself right now with obviously a little history lesson right here. Going into last season, one of the things that you pointed out about him was he was going to be a player that you could coach who had previously averaged double-figure rebounds. And in your career as a coach, only 3 players you had ever coached had averaged double-figure rebounds: David West, DeAndre Ayton, and Ryan Anderson. If this kid is healthy, what type of an impact could he have for you in the pivot?
Well, my experience, there's 2 statistics that seem to travel, and you could follow players as far back as their 10th, 11th grade year in high school. If you get fouled a lot, you shoot a lot of free throws per game, those guys just always have a knack of continuing to be able to do that. And the second statistic that seems to really just travel or move as levels change is rebounding. And you're right, Lucina in back-to-back years at Long Beach State averaged more than 10 rebounds a game. He was one of America's best leading rebounders in his final year at Long Beach. We coached him all summer, and for 2 months into the fall, he was slated to be our starting center a year ago. And as you know, John, we lost him for the season. He tore his ACL. The good news is it happened so early last year in October that if you look at it, I think he's about 7 months and some change since his surgery. So he has a lot of that behind him. We're looking forward to having a good summer with him, but I have no doubt his experience, his rebounding, his quickness defensively can be a real asset for our team this year.
Is there a timetable for when you anticipate he'll be full go and ready to play again?
My guess is he'll be able to do most, if not everything, in the month of June. But as we get into the middle of the summer, July in particular, I think he'll be cleared for contact.
Well, let's talk now about another player who you went against last season because he was in your conference, so there's familiarity with him. Simeon Wilcher was a part of the Big East Conference who you coached against. He was at St. John's. What elements of his game kind of put your antennas up when you went against him last year and then when you saw him in the transfer portal?
Well, one thing we really try to pay attention to in the transfer portal is, do they win where they're at? Was he a part of a winning team? Who is his coach? And, to be able to play for Rick Pitino, not for 1 year, but in Sim's case, 2 years, playing in the Big East, St. John's. I watched his growth and development, was well aware of who he was. We tried to get him out of high school in terms of recruiting him. But just to watch his improvement, he was a key fixture on a 2 seed last year in terms of his role, his level of play, and what he did from start to finish on St. John's team last year. I respected him a great deal, not just for his offense, but I thought he had the opportunity and ability to be an elite defensive player. And as you know, St. John's a year ago was one of America's best defensive teams, and Sim was a real factor in that. He was in the mix, playing the role that he played every game and every day. So, we're catching him at a point in his career where he's going from year 2 to year 3. He's a winner. I think that he has the future of a guy with the ball in his hands and a guy who can make decisions. And I think he has another level in him. I'm sure at St. John's, that would have been their goal, is to continue to develop him and allow him to get to another level. And my hope is we here at Texas, with the role that we have for him, the SEC, and I think a style of play that will really fit him well. I'm really excited about him. But his winning qualities as a teammate and as a player, that's what I'm the most excited about.
Well, you mentioned defense, and the thing that comes to my mind when I hear defense in Texas is Kendall Weaver. And that game that we were at in Dayton in the first 4, when Texas had control of the game in the first half, I noticed that it was very difficult for you guys to seize control when Kendall Weaver was on the floor affecting things. As a head coach, what is it like to coach a player who can have a great impact on the game by not demanding shots?
No, those qualities are so rare, John. And what happens is, contagious behavior can go a lot of ways, right? You can look at it as bad or good. In Kendall's unique style of play, I think his contagious behavior, it permeates into the crowd. The crowd loves the way he plays. I think it's very difficult if you're his teammate to give less than 100%. When you see the effort level that he plays at and the way he impacts the game, and just his unselfish nature, it fosters togetherness and team play and teamwork. And it's one thing to talk about it and preach about it as a coach, but when you have somebody who demonstrates it on an everyday basis and through his own style of play, man, it's a powerful, powerful ingredient to have on your team. And that's one of the things that we really tried to do this spring, is that to get Kendall to come back and be a part of what we're doing here. I also think he'll be a great fit into how we play the game. So, yeah, amazing kid, great student, really good player, and someone who has a unique style for sure.
Sean, is there any other returnees at Texas or newcomers that you're bringing in that have you extra excited going into, obviously, summer workouts here?
I'm excited about all of them. Jordan Pope, Tremont Mark, Nick Cody. Those are 3 other guys that Tremont and Jordan played a bigger role than Nick. But I do believe Nick was a young freshman a year ago. He's got a lot of talent to make a jump as a sophomore. But, Tremont and Jordan, like Kendall, when you think about their experience, John, I mean, they've been in the tournament. They've scored over 1,000 points. Tremont has played for Kelvin Sampson for multiple years at Houston, and Eric Musselman at Arkansas was a huge fixture on last year's team. I thought a year ago, towards the end of the season, when he had the ball in his hands more, it brought out the best in Texas a year ago. And we're looking forward to being able to help him do that more this year. And Jordan Pope, Jordan scored over, I think, 1,300 points at this point, both in the Pac-12 at Oregon State and here at Texas. So that experience, not only retention coming back, and these guys are in their 4th year. They're at the end of their career. It's a powerful thing to have as part of your program.
Most head coaches, when they get a new job, they want to feel things out. They want to obviously play a couple of games where they're going to be at home and they're expected to win. And you were doing a cannonball into the fire on November 4th. You're playing Duke in Charlotte. When that game was obviously brought to the table, why did you opt to take the plunge?
Well, I'm not sure I had all the power to veto that. Let me just start with that, John. That is a tall order. But look, you're at Texas, and to be able to play Duke in what Duke means, opening night of college basketball. Look, if you're trying to be the best, you can't run from the competition. We know that's going to be a very challenging game. And in some ways, college basketball rewards you for playing games like that. We're playing against an elite team away from home early in the season. There's nothing anyone can ever say about, you not challenging your team or you believing in your team through non-conference scheduling. We're also at UConn. So, you play at UConn, you play in Charlotte against Duke. We're in the Maui Invitational. So, yeah, there's some things you inherit and you love. There's some things you're going to make the best of. But I do think that playing a challenging non-conference schedule is the future. And look, playing in SEC with that combination, I'm excited to watch our home crowd become one of the best in the country here at the Moody Center.
Sean,
Matas, you didn't ask me about Matas.
Yeah.
And Cam Heidi as well. And I don't want to leave those two guys out, John, because, we got both of them from the portal. And, Cam Heidi, the world may know Cam a little bit more because he was at Purdue for 3 years and played in the national championship game for Matt Painter and played great in this year's NCAA tournament for Purdue. And again, it's back to that taking players that were a part of a winning culture, playing for a really good coach. And Matas, same thing, being a freshman of the year in his conference as a young big, great hands, and I think has a bright future. So that all those guys, they build towards, I think, the excitement of our first team.
Sean, with you going to Texas now, 9 of the active 16 head coaches in the SEC have at least taken a team to the Elite Eight. What is it going to be like coaching in this conference?
I mean, you're coaching against the best. I would also say that I'm not going to overstep my bounds and act as if leaving the Big East is less than. I mean, there's some powerful coaches in that league, as you well know, John. And every night you were challenged in a huge way there, coming from the Pac-12 as well. And it goes to your earlier questions you've asked me, going through seasons upon seasons of coaching, not only in the Pac-12 and Pac-10, but in the Big East. It prepares you the most you can be prepared for as you show up in the SEC now. I have 20 years of traction behind me. I don't know if I have 20 in front, but 20 behind me. And I think I look at that as a huge wealth and advantage of experience and an advantage, because you're right. Night in, night out in the SEC, you're going against one of the best coaches in the country. And again, and that's part of the challenge that excited me the most.
Final thing, you obviously still got to get through summer workouts and you got to get a feel for your team. But regardless of wins and losses, what are the biggest things you want to accomplish in year one?
To really connecting with our fan base and especially our students here. I think that sometimes what's understated is the home court venues in college basketball. John, because of how hard you work at this, that what's synonymous with long-term success in college basketball, the iconic home courts that they call home.
Yep.
When you think of Duke, you don't think of their campus. You think of Cameron Indoor Stadium. When you think of Kansas, you think of Fog Allen Fieldhouse. When you think of Xavier, for example, you think of the Centos Center, and if you don't think about it, you'll feel it when you show up there. So I think that here we have a brand new venue that's on our campus. It's world class in its nature. It is a spectacular building. It seats 10,700, Moody Center, and to have an electric crowd, to have a student section that shows up every game and gives you that competitive advantage at home. You really need that to be successful in the SEC and to attain the goals that I think all of us have for our basketball program. So that's not something you just snap your fingers, or when your team's good, the crowd automatically gets good. But I think to connect all those things is a powerful force moving forward, and that's at the top of my list.
Well, I'm going to follow up on that because I think it's an interesting point, because when Rick Barnes had those great teams at Texas, you would sometimes watch the games on TV and it felt like they were being played in the library. How do you as a staff ignite the fan base and make the home court that you desire?
Well, in fairness to the Irwin Center and a lot of buildings like that once were great and huge and 16,000, a lot of good memories in the Irwin, as it grew older, it might not have been the best atmosphere to bring that out. We have no excuses now. And Coach Barnes will be probably the first one to tell you he didn't coach in Moody Center, right? So I think that when you look at how it feels when you're in it, where it's located, and the energy that you're capable of cultivating, That's a big deal. We have the venue to do it. And I'm not going to at all pass the buck that you have to be good. You have to win. You have to have a good product. You have to have a good team. You have to have an exciting style. I'm more sure about our style than anything. It can become really exciting, and we have to be good. But here at Texas, there's no excuses. We have everything that we need to cultivate a great home crowd and all the resources to be a great program. So it's up to us to do it now.
Sean, congratulations on the job. Appreciate a couple minutes, and as always, look forward to staying connected along the way.
Thank you. Don't be afraid to get out there in the sun. You look pale right now. It's been a long winter for all of us who were in the Northeast and Midwest. It's time to get outside, man. Golf a little bit. You know, it's only, what is it? It's May. This
is only May.
This is only May. I mean, you got a runway here before things get heated up. Get outside a little bit, get some vitamin D.
I'm John Rothstein, reminding you to subscribe to the CBS Sports College Basketball YouTube page.